I wanted to do this talk. I had the idea, it's Myrtle Beach, and you probably had to see a golf game now and then. And I thought it'd have two parts, and the first part of the talk is going to be like you're watching a golf game where I'm the golfer, and Robin is the caddy, and her camera is the clubs. So you can stay where you are, or you can follow us, but we're going to tee off over here. I want to begin by saying thank you. Thank you, Avatar Mayor Baba. Thank you, Baba's beloved Mehera. You are always with me. Thank you. And I want to thank the Avatar Mayor Baba Circle of Friends for allowing me to show my paintings, and all the dear friends and family who encouraged me to do the paintings, and it really means so much. Very, very much. So I wanted to start with this painting because I'm going to be showing this painting on my Facebook page, and I'm donating the whole painting with the frame to the Circle of Friends in the form of an online auction. So I am now bidding $500 for this painting with its frame. And the auction is going to go until December 30th. So if you want to top my bid, you can. If nobody tops my bid, I will donate the $500 and take the painting back home. So this painting, whenever I look at this one, I think about a dear friend of mine who doesn't believe in Baba and isn't interested in Baba. But when I showed her this painting, she really loved it. And she said it really made her happy. And she said it was because it says nothing matters but love for God. And she's a person who has a lot of challenges in her life. And so I was very touched about that. Ever since I had read that quote, inscribe these words in your heart, I always pictured doing it like that. And so this one was, you see that picture, and for a long time I thought it would just be too difficult to do a painting, but at the same time I couldn't resist because I loved the picture. And as I began working on it, I was kind of perplexed that that big thing with the little Babas wasn't a lot of different Babas. There was only like 3 different images repeated. And then years later I read, in the Mehera book that the reason for that was because that's were the only pictures they had. But it kind of reminded me of Andy Warhol with this thing, so I thought it was kind of a modern art thing. And this is another one of the Radha Krishna ones. When I was a child, my dad was an artist, the whole family were artists. We went to art museums and galleries. We grew up in Chicago. And we saw a show where there were pictures of Krishna and Radha, and I was so intrigued, and I was saying to my parents, who is that blue guy with the flute? And all those ladies with the saris, and they're having so much fun on the cows. And they would just go, oh, we don't know, but they're wrong and we're right. So we go, but who was he? So then when I saw these pictures, I got, and Baba had said that Krishna was not really blue. And that was just an artistic thing. But I really wanted to make him blue. So I asked Baba if I could make him blue, and I felt that he said I could. So. This was one of my first attempts to make a big painting. I raised 4 wonderful kids, and when they were little, I didn't really paint much, and I just had some Prismacolor pencils, and I would make small drawings. And I liked working in color, and the Prismacolor had nice colors. So this was an attempt to make something bigger, and I was finding in this climate that a lot of my stuff on paper was getting kind of soft and mushy in a few years. And so I thought I wanted to put some things on canvas and get a little bigger. So I started this in paint, but I was just having a bad time with the paint, and I just pulled out my pencils and sharpened a lot of pencils. So it's really a giant pencil drawing. Whoa. That I coated with clear plastic.
That's amazing.
Is that colored pencils?
Mostly, it has a little bit of paint, but it's mostly colored pencil. So this one is, I've taught little kids, and I taught like in the primary school 5-year-olds, and they love their birthday and they love pink, and even the boys at that age love pink. And we had these marker pens, and the pinks kept getting used up, and I found at some office store a big sale on pink highlighters. And I just bought this huge thing of pink highlighters, and I remember this little boy going, "Pink, pink, we have pink, 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 we have pink." And then when I read about this period, it's like, this period was after the first accident. And it seemed to me like this kind of enchanted time when Baba had told them he was going to suffer. Then he had the accident, and he did suffer, and they got through it, and he really made a good recovery. And Mehera felt happy that she'd been with him, and that she'd been brave, and that she'd suffered. And so then there was like this period of, okay, you know, we got through that, it's Mehera's birthday, everything's pink, and in a way I feel like this moment, in some way it always exists. So this was one of my early attempts too to do, this was in the year 2000, and it was another photo that I loved, but it always bothered me that you couldn't see Mehera's hands. And I would make sketches and try to think of what her hands would be doing, and looking at pictures of her hands. And in those days, Lindsay Ryder, a very dear Baba lover who had lived in India and been close to Mehera, was ill, and she was staying in a house in Briarcliff. And I went and visited her and had my sketchbook, you know, and I said, you know, that I really wanted to draw Mehera's hand, and I asked her if she would pose for me how Mehera's hands might be, and she did, and I sketched them. But then she said, but you know, Mehera told me that lots of times when she was being photographed with Baba, she would hide her hands. And she didn't want to distract from Baba. And that in many pictures she was deliberately hiding her hands to not be distracting. And so then when I went home to work on the painting, I thought, well, am I like just thinking of my concept of what the painting should be, or am I trying to do this, what Mehera wants? And so I hid her hands. So this is one I always wanted to paint when I heard, you know, Mehera say that, you know, your love sun makes my moon bright. And I did a lot of sketches of, I mean, almost any face of Baba can be the sun. And I wanted them to be looking at each other. And a lot of them, I had them in profile, but I finally ended up with this one. So that was a lot of joy for me to do that.
More to say about it, the layers like fabric.
The layers, like, yeah. So this picture I saw in Sheila Fenster's book, Growing Up with God. And I didn't remember ever seeing this photo before, and I was really taken with it. But it was kind of dark, and I really like light colors. And it was, you know, small, analog, old, dark. It was very dark. The background was like, you'll see it, it's kind of in the middle of Growing Up with God. They're in Happy Valley. But the image of it, you know, was like haunting me. I wanted to paint it, and at the same time, I didn't know if I wanted to go that dark, but then if you try to go light, you lose it. So that was just getting into darker colors than I usually want to. And somehow these patterns just started coming. It also just seemed like the background was boring. And I watch a lot of like quilting shows and sewing shows and craft shows on TV, and I'm really not good at sewing, but I just find it relaxing, and sometimes I love the things that people do with fabric. And so I thought I'm just going to try to make some beautiful fabric there. So I also like to just doodle on graph paper, and so I had come up with this little pattern on the border of this one. And so this was another one that's so beautiful when they were picnicking in clowns. And So I once had an art teacher who said, you should never put in one painting the 3 primary colors and the 3 secondary colors all the same amount at the same time, and that would be a bad painting. So of course I had to do it.
Whoa.
And this is more images that are just so lovable, and this was like before there were any accidents, and it's Conchagani in the late 30s, and a very happy time, and Bob is so playful, and he's he looks like somebody in a Broadway musical.
It's so cute.
He's having so much fun with the cane and with Kippy, and so that was another thing that I wanted to do, and I did a lot of sketches and thinking about how I wanted to put it together, and finally came up with that. It was a lot of fun to paint. It's just, I usually don't like to have music playing when I'm painting because sometimes the painting has its own music. You know, this one definitely did.
What next?
So this is from a photograph Elizabeth Patterson had taken of Mehera and Baba. And I loved to climb trees when I was a kid, and I just always loved pictures of Baba and Mehera in trees. But the photograph was very backlit, so it was hard to see their faces. And I ended up having to make their skin tones darker than I usually do because it was backlit, and so it gets kind of diffused. But I always meant to put a bird in, and then I forgot. When I take it home, I'm going to put a bird in. Should be a bird. So, and I loved all the pictures of Baba riding Chompy. They had this white donkey, and they were in a rural area, and they both loved animals, and they all loved animals. And they had this beautiful white donkey, and it was. I've made a few pictures of them with Chompy, and Chompy, it's a little difficult because he almost looks like a horse. He doesn't have like that big Shrek donkey kind of nose at all. He's got this very refined face, and so it's like a short horse with big ears. You know? But in the books, Mehera, which means so much to me, Mehera was saying that she grew up in a Catholic school, and she always loved depictions of Jesus riding on a donkey. Oh. And so when they had this pretty donkey, she said, Baba, you know, would you let us take pictures of you riding on the donkey? It will be so sweet. And so he did. But in all the ones where Baba's on Chompy too, you can see that part of Mehera's mind is like making sure he doesn't fall off, because she was really good with donkeys and horses. And I just do want to say that I'm really happy that while my show is up, this beautiful painting by David Barrison is here, our dear friend David, who just passed away. So this is, I mean, because all these images are images that were in my heart a long time, and I wanted to paint, and I finally did. And so, and this, I love that quote, when Mehera is happy, I am happy. So I love that. And the calves were named Raja and Pradam, and Raja means king, and Pradam means prime minister. This one ate some poison plants and died young. This one lived to pull the New Life caravan. And these were these beautiful pictures and very like monumental photographs Mani had taken. And I always feel like Mehera looks especially relaxed when Mani's the photographer. She was just so comfortable with Mani and trusted Mani. And so she's just like really herself and very poised and just happy to be there. So I did kind of a goofy thing that I don't know if I'll ever do again. I'd gotten this shiny metallic gold paint, and I painted their whole faces just flat gold, and then did the features on top. And in some light, it looks really shiny, but in other light, it looks this sickly green. So this one is one of my personal favorites, and somehow this one to me is like the fulfillment of of something that I wanted to do. And this one says, Mehera loves me as I ought to be loved. And I feel like it's a painting for everybody, whether people believe in Baba or not, or any religion or not, but everyone has some ideal, and just to know that there was a person who loved God as he ought to be loved, you know, and you know, from all different religions, anyone can feel inspired just to see that, you know, and I feel like Mehera represented Maya. She represented all of creation. So she is constantly doing that for all of us. She is always loving Baba as he ought to be loved, and she represents us in doing that. When I was a teenager, my grandparents had a little cottage in Michigan. We lived in Chicago. And I would carry my little sketchbook and my colored pencils and go off into the woods and go off on little paths and trails where most of the people didn't go. They were mostly going to the lake and go swimming. And I would sit quietly and sketch flowers and things. And one day I was going on a little path back to my grandparents' house, and I was just looking down at the colors of the pine needles. And I had been sitting very quietly, sketching. And I didn't realize I was walking quietly, and I must have been, whatever it is with the, not downwind. So I was walking along, and I looked up, and there was a deer right there, so close to me. I'd never been that close to a deer. And I stopped, and I mean, we were really close, and the deer looked up, and for 1 minute, our eyes met, and that deer just looked so shocked. And I just felt so bad, and it was like this beautiful, wild, gentle creature, and I had just entered into its space and upset it, and the deer just turned and ran really fast, and I felt terrible. So the first time that I met Mehera, and I had been in India, I'd had my sketchbook, and I had sketched the buildings and the bullock carts and the pilgrims and the trees, and I'd sketched Mani and Alaba and Pendu, and whenever I would sketch someone, I would say, you know, may I sketch you before I started, and I knew very little about Mehera at that time, very, very little. I knew, you know, that Baba said she loved him as he ought to be loved, but I didn't know much more than that. I sort of imagined that all the Mandali would be like a combination of like royal family and movie stars, and that they would be so above me, and that they wouldn't even really care what I did, and that they would be very used to being in the limelight. And so I was standing on the veranda at Meherad, and I just said to Mehera, you know, Mehera, may I sketch you? And she looked up at me, and the look in her face was exactly like that deer.
Oh my God.
She looked at me like so shocked and so appalled, and she said, no!
Oh my
And she
God.
turned and ran away from me just like that.
Oh my God.
And I just was like, oh my gosh. You know, that was really what I didn't want to do, you know, and it was just like the same thing as with the deer, only 100 times more so, like this gentle, wild, sheltered creature, and I had just stepped too close and right into her space and made her uncomfortable, and like right behind me there was some kind of little stool that I just sunk down into and just put my sketchbook and pencils on the floor, and we're just on the veranda. And I felt so bad, you know, and my heart was racing, and I thought, oh, and that image of the deer was just in my mind. So, you know, people were on the porch, people were in the garden, and I was kind of oblivious to what was going on for a little while, and then there was kind of a break, and people were going to the bathroom and getting a cup of tea. And I was still just sitting there, and I suddenly realized that someone was standing like right here. And somebody else was kind of standing over here. And I realized this was Mehera and that was Mani. And practically everyone else had gone. And I should have stood up, you know, Mehera was standing and there wasn't another chair there, but I didn't even stand up. I just stayed there and just looked up at her, and she just looked down at me and she said, "If I let you sketch me, will you tell me to hold still?" And I said, "No, Mehera, if you let me sketch you, I would want you to move and be natural. And I would just be making fast sketches, and I would not tell you to sit still." She kind of said, "Well, if I let you sketch me, would you have to sit very close to me?" And I said, "No, Mehera." And I was looking around for what could be the farthest away, and she was sitting in a chair that was at one end of the veranda where there was a cupboard. And there were stairs at the other end. And I said, "No, I could go on the stairs." And I'd sit up high on the stairs and I wouldn't move. And I'd be far away. And she said, "If I let you sketch me, would you stare at me?" And I said, "Yes, Mehera, if you let me sketch you, I would have to stare and stare and stare. I wouldn't say anything. I wouldn't ask you to do anything. I would stay far away, but I would be staring." And she said, "Okay." And she went in her chair and made this sketch.
Oh my God. Beautiful.
So shortly after that, I went on a little trip to Aurangabad with some other Westerners, and was gone overnight, and then came back, and I had a little Baba card that fit in my pocket, and it was a picture I had never seen before of Baba, very small profile, very simple. And while we were riding along in this bumpy Jeep or whatever it was, I kept taking that picture out and looking at it, and we were bumping along. And so then the next night, when I was back at my hotel in Ahmednagar, I woke up in the night and I couldn't sleep. And I looked at the clock, and it was 4 o'clock in the morning. So it was really too early to get up, but I couldn't sleep. And so I got out that little card, and I got my sketchbook and my pencils, and I started to sketch Baba from that little card. And when I finished it, I just put it away and went back to sleep. And that was at about 5, but I went back to sleep. So then I woke up at about 7:30, and I looked at it, and I thought, I can't draw that good. I can't make a drawing that nice. This drawing is way better than any other drawing I've ever made. And so I took it, to Mehera, and I showed it to Mehera. And Mehera said, "When did you make that drawing?" And I said, "I woke up at about 4 in the morning and worked on it, and I went back to bed at 5. And Mehera said, "While you were drawing Baba, I was asleep and I was having a dream about you. And I was dreaming that you were drawing Baba."
God.
And I woke up at 5.
Wow.
And she kissed the drawing. And so
Wow. Incredible.
that's my Baba story.
Whoa. It's wonderful. God.
So as time goes by, that just becomes more and more important to me. And yes.
Did Mehera say anything after she woke up?
Oh yes, thank you. Yes, she said when she woke up, she said out loud to Baba, the way she did, that she talked to Baba, and she told me that she said to Baba, "Oh yes, Baba, Sally should draw you." She was drawing the bullet cards, she was drawing the people, she drew money, she even drew me. She should draw you, Baba. Yeah.
And you had already had.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's manifestation.
So at that time, we didn't see as many pictures that we have now. And the only pictures I had seen were small and black and white. And so one thing I told Mehera was that I wanted to make those pictures bigger with colors. So now this is really a big fulfillment for me, that here they are bigger and with colors.
Wonderful.
Wow.
So,
So what was she like, Mehera?
well, I personally felt, and I think a lot of people felt, before I went there, I felt disappointed that I heard about Baba after he had dropped the body. But being with Mehera, there's that expression, my cup runneth over. And I had never experienced that before, but when I was with Mehera, I always felt my cup runneth over, and that there was so much love coming off of her that I couldn't possibly absorb and contain, and I felt more than satisfied, and didn't feel like, I felt so much of Baba's love through her.
And what was she like?
Oh, physically, well.
No, I mean just kind of like her mannerisms and like.
Well, you can see films of her too, but if you have time for one more little funny story, I'll tell you something. Because I'm kind of tall, and I grew to be this height when I was about 11, and so most of my friends were like about this big for a while, and I always felt too big. Kind of like that Alice in Wonderland thing. And of course, I've been looking at pictures of Baba and looking at pictures of Mehera, and I had read descriptions of them, and I knew that they were both about 5'6" or so, and I was 5'9", but I sort of didn't put it together. And the first time that Mehera embraced me, I just felt like I was so big. Sort of like pictured like kind of we were the same size, and she was so fine and delicate, and I just felt really big, but I didn't say anything to anyone. We were there on the veranda, and there's a path coming up, and right away Mehera looked up at me and she said, "It isn't how big you are, it's how you carry yourself. Look at Jane." And she went like that, and coming up the path was Jane Haynes. And she said, "Jane is tall, and look how she carries herself."
That's funny.
Yeah. So do you want to do some music? Or does anyone want to? Yes.
Yeah, when did you go to India next after that first?
78.
Indeed, yes.
And you told me one time that she encouraged you, so can you tell more about her asking you? Did you bring drawings you had done in the States? Can you talk about that?
Well, yeah. I never, while Mehera was alive, after that first drawing, I never did another drawing while she was alive that, for her, that she really liked. I had a weird, the whole saga with that first drawing, and it's lost, and I feel I should have given it to her, and I didn't. But after that, I tried to make some more drawings for her, and she would accept them, but she always would give them away to other people. But I did a drawing for Dun Satha that Dun had hanging up, and Mehera liked that one. And after Dun went to Baba, the Mandali brought that one to Meherside and hung it up at the house in Meherside. It was small, and I had written my name kind of small, and for a while they thought Susan White had done it. Sometimes our work looks similar, and then when Susan was there, she said, "No, that's not mine, that one was Sally." So, but I feel like the encouragement was more really internal, and another thing was the little drawings that I did with colored pencils, and I would use a lot of different colors, and Mehera liked that, and she said she liked colors, and she said Baba liked colors, so I always felt encouraged by that too. Yes?
In this painting and some of the other paintings, you have kind of like a rainbow diffraction going on. Does it mean different things in different paintings, or is it about sort of the feeling of Baba being in all the three worlds at once, or what is it?
Or is it pretty?
Yeah. So, I mentioned that my father is the artist Robert Amft, the American artist, and that's what Jane Haynes used to call him. She called him the internationally known American artist Robert Amft. So I said, we're going to stick with that. We're going to call him that. And he was a contemporary of Lynn Ott. He met Lynn, and when Lynn was studying with Hans Hofmann, my father was studying with Francis Chapin at the Art Institute. And Francis Chapin was a cousin of Elizabeth's father, which my father didn't think was interesting at all. But he loved Francis Chapin. And my father's art, he never allowed his art to be really pretty. And he was always trying to convince me that art could be ugly. And he was always, trying to get me to appreciate modern art and kind of dark art and serious art and scary art and all that kind of thing, And I always wanted to go to where there were the Madonna and fat babies and the angels. So I think that was good for me, and that and being with kindergartners for 24 years. So I finally gave myself permission to make the paintings that I wanted to make when I was 5. I fully understand that the real art world will look at my art as if it's like one of my 5-year-old boys would look at a Barbie doll. Too much pink. So, I hope other people have stories too.
Did you find yourself pulled to make certain paintings, or did you say, I want to make a painting, and then it just began to evolve in front of you?
Well, all of them are, just so irresistible. And I think I always feel like I'm not going to be able to do it. But then with each photograph that I see, I really love it so much I want to try. But at the same time, each time I think I'm not going to be able to do it. But then it's like irresistible. It's like, so when I do. But yeah.
Do you feel Baba and Mehera with you when you're painting?
Yes. Yeah. I
Both
do.
of them?
Yes. I feel Baba and Mehera with me all the time. And I'm very grateful to Baba and Mehera for being with me all the time. And always have been with me and always will be. And I'm grateful.
Let's see. Meher Baba, Lord and friend, my beloved to the end. Meher Baba, Lord and friend, my beloved to the end. You are my life, my heart, my soul. You are my only goal. Jai, 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 Meher Baba, Lord and friend, my beloved to the end. Meher Baba, Lord and friend, my beloved to the end. Beloved, I am by your light. Your love sun makes my moon bright. Jai, 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 Meher Baba, Lord and friend, my beloved to the end. Meher Baba, Lord and friend, my beloved to the end. All day long Baba, Lord and friend, my beloved to the end. Though my heart weeps all the while, for your sake I wear a smile. Jai, 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 Mehera Baba, Lord and friend, my beloved to the end. Mehera Baba, Lord and friend, my beloved to the end. Make me, Lord, your song of praise. Fill all hearts with your dear grace. Jai, 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 Mehera Baba, Lord and friend, my beloved to the end. Mehera Baba, Lord and friend, my beloved to the end.
There was a very interesting story about that song. Is it okay to share this?
Yes.
In 1972 or beginning of 73, Monty wrote a letter to me saying Mehera wanted me to sing that song on an album we were going to do in Nashville, and that Monty had written a song too, Monty's song. And because Mehera had been so much in seclusion, I felt a little shy about it, even though I had gotten a letter saying they wanted me to sing this on this album. So I went to Elizabeth Patterson to talk to her about it, and she said, it was not like shock, but she was very surprised, because having a song by Mehera put on a record that people were going to hear and it would be her words, there was a trepidation about it. So she had me write to India to ask, were Monty and Mehera sure that they wanted this to go out, that it's to be recorded? And Monty wrote back, yes, Mehera wants this to be on the record. So in a way, I felt like it was like something that was opening up, that Baba was beginning to share Mehera more with the world, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it was just interesting, Elizabeth was so, a little bit cautious about that at first.
Because she was like being protective?
Yeah.
Because Mehera had been so much in seclusion for so many years and didn't even come out to see men until a year before Baba dropped his physical body, So she had been very secluded, and having her name go out, more at a recording and a song that she had composed, so it felt to me like a point of movement in a different direction.
But she asked.
She asked.
Yeah.
The song that Mehera loved me to sing, so please sing along too. This is a song that a poetry student of my grandfather's wrote, and Bob Brown found in my grandfather's study outside of Sumter, South Carolina, and put to music. And Mehera loved this, so sing along. I envy every grain of sand your foot has trod upon, every shoulder that your hand has lightly rested on, every word your hands have formed, every flower your kiss has warmed, but most of all your dear delight, the star stars that shine for you at night, for you and I. All my life I've tried to keep something lovely, something deep in my soul for you to see. If ever you should look at me, but I faltered at your gaze, blushed and turned aside my face, for all the beauty that I knew was the beauty that is you. Mehera. All my life I've tried to keep something lovely, something deep in my soul for you to see. If ever you should look at me, but I faltered at your gaze, blushed and turned aside my face, for all the beauty that I knew was the beauty that is you. Mehera.
I met Mehera inside the Samadhi, and Jack Small, if anyone knows Jack Small, had come from Los Angeles, so he brought the 5 of us when I first went to India in '76. So all I remember is it was one of Mehera would come 2 times a month to perform arti, and I don't remember any other person except Mehera. So I guess it was sort of, I only had eyes for Mehera because she never went anywhere alone. And I remember her, I was inside the Samadhi with these 4 people, and she slipped out of her slippers, and she walked, and she was so inward, I didn't know how she was walking around. You know, she was just with Baba, is all I could say. She was, and I felt that Baba wanted me to meet her there, so I would know how special it was that I could sit with her on the porch. You know, it was like unbelievable, this beautiful, beautiful being. And so then I met her on the porch, and I was just so happy to sit around her. You know, she could be talking about anything, but she was almost like a heart beating, you know, whatever she was talking about, she was inside with Baba. And of course there were always a lot of people on the porch. And then of course you could go to tea with Mehera, and that was wonderful. And I remember the first time I went, and there were like helpers around, but I really only had eyes for Mehera. So, and in a way it was a little bit difficult to be with all those helpers around. And but I remember being in the tea room, and just that room, I could just say was a holy room to sit there with Mehera. And it was very funny because she'd have people help and they guest and pour the tea, and she was, I have to even use the word swashbuckling. This person was a little nervous trying to pour the tea, and Mehera says, here. Like, this swashbuckling, it's like, just like she got on that horse and right away. She was not she was strong. I mean, just so many instances. And the last time I performed for her, she let me perform for her, it was her birthday. And what I was doing, I got confused, and I was on the amphitheater, it's just down from the Samadhi, and Jerry Edwards, in fact, was playing music for me, what I was doing, and I was just confused about what I was doing, and she's sitting there in the front row, and she raised her arm like Hitler, like that stopper, and I ran over to Jerry and I says, Jerry, we have to stop. He says, no, we're almost through. And then Gary Kleiner was in the group and he says, encore. And I thought, oh my Lord. But anyway, no one saw her raise her arm but me. And I wondered about it and I thought, what was that? And I was so shocked. I thought, she'll never let me perform for her again. But she was stopping my confusion, that's all I could say. She was really a pure force of good. She was just, like in this lifetime I'd struggled with self-esteem or, who I am, kind of grown up in a family that was, And it was just wonderful to think Mehera was my friend. Mehera was my friend. That was the best possible thing. I mean, beyond. And I remember her telling me to take a message to my mother, who could have been the Catholic Pope. She was so Catholic, and the day I left for India, it was like I was going to drop off the earth. My parents were, you're really going? And she sent this message, and she says, tell your mother, about Baba. Well, I got back to the United States, and it was my mother. I can't tell her. She'll blow up or something. And so I went back to India the next year, and I says, Mehera, I couldn't do it. I just chickened out. I couldn't do it. I mean,
Wow.
And she said, love knows no fear. You must do it.
Wow.
So I thought, I have to try something. So I got back, and Baba helped me because the Pope was visiting the United States. And so I says, my friend Mehera, who loves God more than anyone I've ever met, says that you will be growing close, very close to God. That's the best I could do. And I think my mother connected it. My mother was very quiet. And then this is just an aside because Adele Walken, loved Mehera so much and came to my home and met my mother. My mother was afraid of Adele. Adele, I was like, to me, Adele held this feeling of Mother Superior, or like this very strong Catholic nun, And but anyway, we're having dinner around this small table, and Adele was here, my mother was here, and Adele goes, Frances, Rosalie is a very important person in our group, And I'm so cowed that my nose is touching my plate like this. And my mother didn't say a peep, not a peep. And I always felt that Mehera had sent this special love to my mother, that, you know, with giving me the courage to, you know, even though it took like, what, 12 months, and, you know, and I didn't think I could do it, you know. But anyway, Mehera scolded me at times, and that was, I should tell you this one, because this book was passing around on the porch, you know, and, you know, it was kind of casual, a book was going around, and I was sitting behind my friend, who was sitting in probably the only decent chair on the porch, and it was facing Mehera. And it was passing around, but it was passing around, and Mehera was speaking, but it was and then I go like this with the book to my friend, and all of a sudden, I hear Mehera very deliberately say, Rosalie, and of course it went pin drop silence on the porch, because it could have been anybody, but it was my name. Rosalie, have you no manners? How were you brought up? And I sat there, and I inwardly, it was all silent, I was screaming out Baba's name for help. And this flood, and I seldom cry ever, so much, but totally quiet. And I looked around to get away. I thought I could go to Baba's bedroom, and there was someone blocking, and I thought, no, I'm not going anywhere. There's no explanation. But I thought about it afterward. I sincerely and deeply feel she lanced my childhood. She lanced the pain of my childhood. And only Mehera could do it. Only Baba could, you know. And it was, I just have to be eternally grateful to this beautiful
These are just two little incidents I had with Mehera. I didn't know anything when I went to India in 1981. Mehera seemed very far away, and I sort of didn't get it and didn't relate to her that easily or that well. But I knew she was special and all that. But anyway, I had my friend's camera, movie camera, and there were a lot of people on the porch, and I was sitting off the porch and right in front of her, and I'm taking a movie of her. And I'm just, you know, totally focused on this. And she is telling me to stop. And everybody knows it except me. And I'm like totally shy and like holding back and everything. And I was so horrified when I realized that this jerk here is defying Mehera and making her uncomfortable by not stopping the movie when she wanted me to stop.
Oh my God.
And then we were invited to tea. And the first time I really held back, and I was like, I know I'm going to spill something. You know, I just didn't feel comfortable. And so I held back, and I sat as far away from Mehera as I could. And it went all right and everything. And then we got invited again a couple days later. And this time I held back, but the only seat left was next to Mehera.
Oh my God.
So I'm sitting next to Mehera, and she says, let's say a little prayer, and we all held hands.
Oh my God.
And all I know is that from her hand into and through me, it was like a low rumble of electricity that I knew was love. And I'll never forget that. I mean, I don't feel stuff like that mostly, but it just was a gift that I felt she gave me. I don't know what it means, but it was very, very special and made, you know, her forever special to me. And I was in the tomb with the women for Arti, which also, honestly, it felt like it was taking a long time. I thought I was going to faint, maybe. But You know,
Mm.
it's just, that feels like such a treasure now that
Yeah.
I was able to do that, so that's it.
One story about Mehera and my mother, and that's very similar to the one that was just told. Mom was not exactly a Baba lover, but she came to India, and she came because I think she was seeing a very positive change in me. And after I had gotten back from India, she wrote a note out and left it on my desk. And we're in the same house. Usually we didn't write notes to each other. We just said what we needed to say. And I thought, how odd that she's written a note, written this out. And she said, if I am not too old, will you please take me to India the next time you go?
Wow.
Oh, okay. So I walked back to the kitchen and I said, yes. And that was that. I ended up taking her 3 times.
Oh, my God.
But the first time was the best, and she was going into dementia, and by the time she made the 3rd trip, she couldn't really enjoy it. But the first time, she had a wonderful time. She really felt Baba's love. And Mehera pretty well guaranteed it. Mehera took her, she was up on the porch with Mehera. She'd been to tea with Mehera. She began to understand that Mehera was kind of like a queen. And she was there more or less by Mehera's permission and Baba's grace. And that's how she happened to be in India. And she began to understand that. And I remember the same sort of thing. It came time to the end of our visit, our last visit to Mehera's dad. And when it was time for us to leave Mehera's porch, Mehera got up, took my mother's hand by one side, and I had her hand by the other, walked her down the steps, probably out not too terribly far, maybe 20 or 30 feet before saying goodbye. But I could feel, I'd never been allowed to touch Mehera, but that time I did. I felt definitely that Mehera was letting me know that she was staying in touch with me through my mother. And that was kind of a revelation.
Wow.
And I will say one other story too. First time I ever met Mehera, I felt like this was my 2nd trip to India. The first trip with the darshan, and Mehera was sort of a distant presence. We didn't, I don't think no too many men got to talk to her or meet her personally. We knew who she was. She kind of led things, like when we bowed down to the chair in Garupa Sad, she led that, kind of showed us how to do it. But when the 2nd trip, I went there specifically to meet Mehera because I thought I had really not quite received Baba's presence in my life during the darshan. It seemed to me that there was a long way to go, a lot more to do, and maybe I had missed something very important and key to the whole thing. So anyway, I came out there and I was determined to see Mehera. So I got out to Mehera's dad, and I was probably one of the few Westerners out there at that moment. And I told him we didn't have buses back then. You took a rickshaw out or rented a bicycle. And they said, well, you can't see her right now, but she usually comes out on her porch at maybe 2 o'clock. And if you don't mind waiting, I'd come there for that. Maybe she'll see you. Shall I let you know when she comes out? Yes, please do. So it wasn't too long, somebody came over and said, yeah, she's out on the porch and she'll see you now. So I went up there, but I didn't have anything to say to her. What do you say to somebody like that? You can't be buddies. I was scared a little bit, but I was obedient. I definitely wasn't going to touch her. In order to keep from touching her, I made sure I'd have my hands behind my back. And she took me into her bedroom and she showed me several things. She showed me Baba's hair that she had in an evacuated tube. And I remember her telling me that Baba will always be with you. And she told me one or two other things too, but they slipped my mind. I don't know, remember quite what they were. But I'm standing there kind of awkwardly, and I'm wondering what, if anything, I should tell her. And I felt like that all my anxieties and thoughts were painfully obvious to her and were causing her pain. And for me to be causing her pain causes me pain. And this is kind of reverberating. And I looked into her eyes. I thought, well, you love him, but do you love me? And I got the answer. She did have that look of love. She did love me. And I saw, this is the occult side, which I love. Her forehead was not horizontal like ours. Her pore structure formed a sort of a, you might say, a deep wave, a deep S or something, and ended up with a scar. And it was some sort of thing glaringly bright about light, some kind of holy light that was centered at that scar. And anyway, that really made me feel like I was in the presence of God and didn't know what to do with it. She, being gracious, said, would you like to see Baba's tree? So she took me outside. We went around and looked at the image of Baba and the tree. And she asked me if I saw the crown. I didn't quite see the crown, just a slight suggestion of it, but not, I don't quite see the crown. And then she basically said that she had to attend to other things, so I was free to go on and join the rest of the people. That was that.
Oh my God. Jay, Bob.
I met Mehera once in 1986. A group of women and I traveled to India, and it was my first time there. And I don't remember much about it. I remember being vastly intimidated. But this group and I went to tea with Mehera and the ladies, and I felt, as I was talking to Sally yesterday, I felt like an elephant. I felt so awkward. But someone was kind enough to snap a photo of me with Mehera, which I still have, and I'm very grateful for that. And I think we went to RT while she was there with the women. I don't remember much about that. But in 1989, when I went back again, and Mehera had just passed away a few months ago, and all the ladies were exhausted. And I was there for a few weeks and sat on the porch, every Meherazad day, and sat like a stone because I didn't know what to do. and felt very awkward again. But at the end of my stay, the ladies presented me with the scarf of Mehera because I had met Mehera, and I was very touched.
Yeah, there was the first time in 75, at my TT time, day after, on the 7th, we all was standing in line. I met Mehera just quickly, past with everybody else. I did not know anything about Mehera. I couldn't understand the language very well. English was hard for me, but I just moved from Sweden to America in 75. I was standing in line waiting for going into a samadhi, and Mehera, I know the ladies was in the samadhi, and we ended up walking in, and my friend Fly Chris was there, and he comes out very strange. He was shocked. And I looked at Fly and asked him, "What's the matter, Fly?" And he said, "Don't you know that God is in there?" I said, "What?" I didn't understand what you mean. Go in and look for yourself. I've been in a samadhi a couple of times before that. Didn't feel anything. I don't remember a thing about it, except for Mehera I had been carried out, put him on a chair out there, and Mehera comes out and dropped something in my hands, a rose in my hand. I was shocked. I said, "I have to see Mehera again." I was going to leave early because I didn't feel comfortable being there. But Mehera changed my mind 100%. So I had an incredible dream trip with Baba. I mean, I don't believe it. I saw Mehera one more time, and she was just, I said, "I don't know how to thank you, Mehera, for what you did for me, giving me that rose, which I still have." And it was so wonderful to be around Mehera every moment. Amatiti, I was working up on Amatiti. Nana giving me the duty to take care of the samadhi during nighttime from 7 to 10 in the morning when he showed up. So I was on duty all night. And the time when Mehera and the ladies come in about 5 o'clock in the morning, and they go in there and perform arti, and everybody's there, there's a crowd, and I have about 5 or 6 people helping me with everything. And Mehera comes out, "I have the prasad about somebody, and me the prasad. You take the prasad, do it." Everybody says, "Okay, I'll take it." So Mehera comes out, and I'm supposed to give prasad to Mehera. Mani looks at me, I'm completely blown out 100%. After that, weeping, eyes are crying, I don't know what to do. And I'm holding the prasad in my hand, and Mani said, "Turn it around." And Mani taps my hand, and it goes right in her hand. That was so wonderful. Oh my God, I tell her. And later on, Erich come and sees me completely blown out, and he said, "Somebody better come over and get him some chai. Calm him down." That's so funny. God almighty. I love every moment of that. To me,
Neil needs some chai.
yeah, still after Baba passed away, everybody, I have been feeling this in my heart for a long time. So Mehera went away. Mehera was the true, she was more in Mehera. She was as Baba himself. He was almost, you could see Baba right there. Alan and me both were thinking the same way. Alan White and me thinking the same way. It was incredible. And Mehera was incredible. And I never, after her tomb was built up on the hill, I had never touched that tomb. I never touched it with my hand because I feel that nobody should touch it except for women can touch it, and men goes and touch it now. I feel not right about it. And I used to make little sculptures for Mehera to put on her tomb every day, every her birthday. So it would just be a lot of fun that way. Thank you, Baba.
Theus, what about when Mehera told you not to go to Hamirpur again? You were sitting so intoxicated in Hamirpur.
God almighty. That first trip up to Hamirpur with Alaba, I went up with Alaba and Steve Esley and me were up there, and we had incredible time. I mean, it was 14 days with no sleep, nothing. No, it was just, forget it. We had so much fun every day, you know. Alaba went up in his room and we took Alaba up to his place, and he lay down. We went out to listen to the music, and somebody translated every word into your ear, so it's incredible. And I come back, I'm back in Mehera, and everybody asks me, how was your trip? And Mehera says to me, go out to Mehera a couple of days later, and Mehera says to me, what happened to you? She says to me, I am completely blown out. You know, and my tears when I see her, and I'm crying, don't know what to do. And Mehera just said, I think you had enough of going to Hanningford. I don't think you can go there anymore. I still went 2 times more.
You did?
Yeah, and Mehera allowed me to go 2 more times. And it was amazing.
Wow.
Those people were so amazing.
Everyone knows that Bubba said it was like his heart humming
Yeah,
for.
yeah. Yeah. And that's what the people was incredible for Baba. You know, they did such a service to Baba, those people.
So we started with thank you, and I think we should end with thank you. So we can say thank you, Baba.
Thank you, Baba.
Thank you, Baba.
Mehera.